Before we begin today's story, take a moment to subscribe if you enjoy emotionally driven stories that stay with you long after the video ends. These aren't loud stories. They don't shout. They settle quietly into your heart. Some nights when the house is silent, I still hear echoes of that evening. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough to remind me how easy it is to lose yourself when you feel unseen. I never imagined I'd be the kind of woman who would even come close to crossing a line. 12 years of marriage, 12 years of building a life brick by brick. We had the house, the routines, the framed photos smiling down at us from warm-colored walls. From the outside, everything looked steady, safe, but sometimes the strongest walls crack in silence. Mark used to look at me like I was the only person in the room, back when late-night talks stretched into sunrise, and simple dinners felt like celebrations, back when being together meant actually being present. Somewhere along the way, that changed. Now he looks at contracts, deadlines, his phone lighting up at all hours. Even when he's sitting right beside me, it feels like he's miles away, and love without presence starts to feel like distance wearing a familiar face. I tried to ignore the ache, told myself this is what long marriages look like. Comfortable, predictable, quiet. But quiet can turn into lonely if you're not careful. Friday nights used to be our thing. Poker night. His friends would come over. James, Chris, Eric. I'd prepare snacks, fix the living room just right, light a candle or two. I wanted him to be proud. I wanted us to feel alive, surrounded by laughter. Now I feel like part of the background. I cook, I serve, I smile. Then I retreat to the kitchen while their laughter fills the house without me. And yet sometimes I catch something in their expressions, a glance that lingers a second longer than polite, a compliment that carries more weight than it should. Nothing inappropriate, nothing spoken outright, just a reminder that I'm still here, still visible. That realization scared me more than I wanted to admit, because when you've been feeling invisible for too long, even the smallest attention can feel like sunlight after winter. That night started like every other Friday, but I stood in front of the mirror a little longer than usual. Not dramatic, not bold, just a blouse that fit slightly better, lipstick I hadn't worn in months, a quiet attempt to feel like myself again. I told myself it was harmless, and maybe at that moment it was. I didn't know that sometimes the most ordinary nights are the ones that quietly change everything. The doorbell rang at exactly 8:07 p.m. Laughter followed before the door was even fully open. James stepped in first, carrying a pack of drinks like he always did. Chris right behind him, already joking about who was going to lose money that night. Eric gave me a polite smile as he walked past. It felt normal. Too normal. Mark barely glanced up from his phone until the cards came out. Then suddenly he came alive, his voice louder, his smile easier, his attention fully in the room, just not on me. I moved between the kitchen and living room like I always did. Plates, glasses, refills, small talk. And then it happened. James held my gaze a second longer than usual. It wasn't obvious, it wasn't inappropriate, but it wasn't accidental either. I looked away first. A few minutes later, Chris complimented the house, said it looked warmer lately. His eyes flickered toward me when he said it. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I wanted to. That thought unsettled me more than anything else. Mark laughed loudly at something Eric said, leaning back comfortably, completely unaware of the subtle shift in the air. Or maybe he trusted me so completely that he never thought to notice. Trust. That word sat heavy in my chest. By 11:30, the room was hazy with conversation and the faint smell of cigars drifting in from the patio. Mark had been drinking more than usual. The week had been long, he'd said. Big meetings, big stress. He looked tired, and yet he still didn't look at me. Not the way the others were beginning to. When I brought out another round of drinks, James's fingers brushed mine as he took his glass. Just a second. Just skin against skin. But it felt louder than it should have. I stepped back quickly, heart racing. Not from fear, but from awareness. Awareness that something fragile was forming. Not an action, not a betrayal, a possibility. And possibilities can be dangerous. Sit for a minute, Eric said casually. You're always working. Mark didn't object. He didn't even react. That hurt more than I expected. So I sat. At first, it was harmless conversation. About travel, work, old memories. I laughed more than I had in weeks, maybe months. For a brief moment, I wasn't just the wife refilling glasses. I was part of the room again. James leaned forward slightly. "You should join poker one night," he said. "Mark's lucky to have someone who keeps everything together." Mark shrugged lazily from the couch. She wouldn't be interested. Wouldn't be interested? He didn't even ask. Something inside me shifted at that sentence. Not anger, not exactly. Just distance. The kind that grows quietly. As the night wore on, Mark eventually slumped back against the couch cushions, half asleep. The game had slowed, the laughter softened, and suddenly I became very aware of the silence between sentences, of the way the air felt heavier, of how easily I could stand up and walk away, and how I didn't. No one crossed the line. No one said anything explicit, but something invisible had moved. A boundary that used to feel solid now felt thin, and for the first time in years, I felt seen. That was the moment I should have been careful, because loneliness doesn't shout when it's about to change your life. It whispers. Mark's breathing had grown heavy on the couch, half asleep, half unaware. The game had stopped, but no one had officially said it was over. The cards sat untouched on the table. The room felt different now, quieter, but somehow louder inside my chest. I stood up first. "I should get him upstairs," I said softly. James nodded. Chris looked down at his glass. Eric gave a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. As I walked toward Mark, I could feel it again. That awareness. Not words, not actions, just attention. And attention can be intoxicating when you've been starving for it. I gently shook Mark's shoulder. "Let's go to bed." He murmured something I couldn't understand, then let me help him stand. For a moment, I felt grounded again. This was my husband, my life, my choice from 12 years ago. I led him upstairs slowly, his weight heavy against me. Inside the bedroom, I helped him sit on the edge of the bed. He didn't look at me, didn't thank me, didn't even notice the effort. Within minutes, he was asleep. Just like that. I stood there in the dim light, staring at the man I had promised forever to. The room felt colder than it should have. Downstairs, I could still hear faint voices. I should have stayed upstairs, closed the door, ended the night. Instead, I walked back down. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that nothing was happening, that I was still in control, that sitting for a few minutes meant nothing. When I entered the living room, the atmosphere shifted again. James straightened slightly. Chris cleared his throat. Eric gave me a look that was almost questioning, as if silently asking why I came back. "I thought you were done for the night," James said. "Just checking on things," I replied. It sounded weak, even to me. No one moved closer, no one touched me, but the space between us felt smaller than before. "You okay?" Chris asked gently. It was such a simple question, and I almost answered honestly, almost said that I felt invisible, that I missed being looked at like I mattered, that sometimes I wondered when I had become part of the furniture in my own marriage. Instead, I smiled. "I'm fine." That lie tasted bitter. Eric leaned back. "You deserve more nights where you're part of the conversation." There it was again. Not inappropriate, not crossing any lines, but planting thoughts. Dangerous thoughts that I felt guilt creep up my spine. This wasn't right. Even if nothing physical had happened, something emotional was unfolding, and emotional lines are just as real. I stepped back slightly, creating distance. "It's late. You guys should probably head out." This time, my voice was steadier. They didn't argue. Within minutes, jackets were on. Goodbyes were brief. James paused at the door, looking at me like he wanted to say something more, but didn't. The door closed. Silence. The house felt heavy. I locked up and leaned against the door, heart pounding. Not from excitement anymore, from realization. Nothing had happened, and yet something had. Upstairs, my husband slept peacefully, trusting me without question. Downstairs, I stood alone, knowing a small crack had formed in a place I once thought unbreakable. Loneliness hadn't made me betray anyone, but it had shown me how close I could come, and that frightened me more than anything else. Some lines aren't crossed in a moment. They're crossed in silence, piece by piece. If this story made you feel something, subscribe and stay with us for what happens next.